What if I told you the most ruthless empires in history weren't built on gold, steel, or gunpowder? What if the ultimate currency of human survival, the resource that triggered revolutions, funded ancient megacities, and quite literally kept our ancestors from rotting from the inside out, is currently sitting on your kitchen table, practically worthless? Today, we are looking at the invisible engine of human civilization, the white gold. And later, I'll show you why your paycheck has a secret connection to this exact same rock, even if everything you've been taught about it is a complete lie. Let's wind the clock way back. I'm talking way before global banking, oil rigs, or refrigerators. You see, for the vast majority of human existence, sodium chloride wasn't a cheap fry seasoning. It was the ultimate geopolitical pivot. When human populations shifted from hunting and gathering to grain-based farming, our biology panicked. We needed supplemental sodium just to maintain fluid balance, keep our nerves firing, and make our muscles work. Without reliable access to salt, human expansion into permanent dense settlements would have biologically failed. But beyond keeping our bodies alive, salt was ancient high-tech. It possesses intense hygroscopic properties, meaning it aggressively sucks moisture out of organic matter. Before the modern fridge, packing meat in salt was the only viable chemical method for preserving food across seasons, droughts, and long winters. If you wanted to build a city, sail a navy, or march an army across a continent, you needed massive stockpiles of caloric wealth, meaning salted meat and fish. And because this absolute necessity was geographically constrained to specific coastal regions or deep underground deposits, salt became a highly lucrative and heavily controlled commodity. But how did a biological need turn into a global obsession that forged trade empires? That is where the logistics get absolutely insane. Imagine my little stickman self trying to survive in a world where your life depends on a rock found thousands of miles away across a lethal desert. This was the reality of the Trans-Saharan Trade Network, an expansive system kicking off around 500 BCE. Down in the lush, humid forests of West Africa, gold was abundant, but the climate destroyed any local sea salt. The people in these remote regions were so desperate for sodium that they would sometimes exchange it pound for gold dust. Enter the desert nomads. Berber and Tuareg merchants operated massive camel caravans, sometimes thousands of animals strong, hauling enormous 200-pound slabs of rock salt across the treacherous Sahara Desert. The logistics were a nightmare. In remote mining centers like Takaza, salt was so ubiquitous and timber so non-existent that entire homes and mosques were constructed from solid blocks of rock salt and roofed with camel skins. The further that salt traveled from these brutal outposts, the more its value skyrocketed. A single 90-kilo block could double in value just floating down the Niger River to the city of Djenné, eventually commanding a price of around 450 grams of gold. And salt didn't just buy gold, it perfectly preserved the dead. In the Cherabad salt mine in Iran, researchers discovered ancient salt men from over 2 millennia ago. Unlike Egyptian mummies, they were naturally preserved by catastrophic mine collapses. The desiccant effect of the rock salt dehydrated their tissues so flawlessly that scientists literally found intact tapeworm eggs inside a 2,200-year-old mummy's intestines. By the way, if you had a time machine, would you rather hoard gold or salt to survive the ancient world? Drop your survival strategy down in the comments. So, let's address the elephant in the room. Was salt actually more expensive than gold? While we love the phrase, worth its weight in gold, global economic data refutes the idea that salt maintained a higher baseline market price than precious metals across the board. Gold is intrinsically rare and requires immense effort to extract. Salt, conversely, is highly abundant in the oceans and subterranean deposits. The extreme valuations of salt were highly localized market anomalies driven by harsh terrain and exorbitant transport costs. For example, historical records from Venice in 1590 show that 1 ton of salt cost 33 gold ducats, but crucially, only 1 ducat was the cost of the actual physical salt. The remaining 32 ducats covered the massive maritime shipping expenses, state taxation, and merchant profit margins. But from the perspective of human utility, salt was infinitely more valuable. You can survive a lifetime without touching gold, but the absence of salt guarantees an agonizing death. This desperation led to one of the most mysterious economic rituals in history, the silent trade of West Africa. Berber merchants would leave their massive salt blocks at a designated riverbank boundary, beat some drums to signal their arrival, and retreat. The local West African gold miners would then emerge, place a quantity of gold dust next to the salt, and back away. If the merchants thought the gold was sufficient, they took it and left the salt. If not, they stepped back again, waiting for the miners to add more gold. No words spoken, no shared language, just a tense, silent exchange of the world's 2 most powerful commodities. Now remember that thing about your paycheck. Let's crack that historical myth wide open. You have probably heard the persistent folklore that Roman soldiers were paid in physical rations of salt, giving rise to the modern English word salary. The story goes that if a soldier performed poorly, he was not worth his salt. Well, the linguistic connection is factual. The English word salary definitively derives from the Latin word salarium, which is rooted in sal, meaning salt. But the historical narrative? It is a complete fabrication. There is zero empirical, archaeological, or textual evidence to suggest that Roman legions were ever paid directly with physical salt. Roman soldiers were paid in standardized coinage. The term salarium likely evolved idiomatically over time, much like how today we say we are bringing home the bacon without actually being compensated in raw pork. This massive myth traces its origins back to a vague misinterpretation of Pliny the Elder's writings, which was subsequently mangled and cemented as fact by careless 19th-century dictionary lexicographers. Because salt was an inescapable biological necessity with an inelastic demand curve, meaning people were forced to buy it to survive no matter how high the price rose, governments realized it was the perfect mechanism for state taxation and control. Look at the French gabelle. Introduced in the late 13th century, this salt tax evolved into one of the most hated and oppressive institutions in history. The French monarchy monopolized the production and sale of salt and legally forced every citizen over the age of 8 to purchase a minimum quantity each year, sometimes up to 7 kilograms per person. This salt was sold at heavily inflated, state-mandated prices. Because the tax was applied unevenly, massive price discrepancies arose. A pile of salt that cost 31 sous in Brittany cost a staggering 591 sous just across the river in Anjou. This birthed an underground economy of armed salt smugglers. Punishments were draconian. Unarmed smugglers were condemned to row in naval galleys for up to 10 years, and armed smugglers faced execution. This crushing economic burden bred deep intergenerational resentment, serving as a major catalyst for the French Revolution in 1789. Salt was also weaponized in active combat. During the American Civil War, the Union Army fought the Confederacy by destroying their salt. A standard Confederate soldier required 10 pounds of bacon a month, which required massive amounts of salt to prevent rotting. The North launched aggressive blockades and targeted military strikes to obliterate Confederate salt works. Without salt, Southern farmers could not preserve meat, leading to massive spoilage, severe troop malnutrition, and a breakdown in military logistics that contributed heavily to the South's ultimate surrender. So how did this holy, civilization-building resource, the stuff that sparked revolutions and funded empires, become a dirt-cheap grocery store afterthought? The multi-millennial reign of salt ended abruptly in the 19th century. The definitive death blow to the scarcity of salt was delivered by a 23-year-old Belgian chemist named Ernest Solvay. In 1863, he successfully commercialized the ammonia soda process, a revolutionary chemical breakthrough that synthesized high-purity soda ash using two universally abundant raw materials, limestone and salt brine. The success was astronomical. By 1900, Solvay's method produced 95% of the world's soda ash. This triggered a massive global scale-up of industrial brine extraction. Supply absolutely flooded the global market, and the price of dietary salt crashed forever, transforming the once sacred white gold into one of the cheapest commodities on the planet. But salt didn't lose its power. It merely migrated from the kitchen into the invisible machinery of global industry. Today, over 50% of all global industrial salt consumption is dedicated solely to chemical manufacturing. Through the chlor-alkali process, salt brine is used to produce the chlorine required for our plastics and the caustic soda used for water treatment and petroleum refining. And its future is even bigger. While salt used to preserve the meat of armies, its future lies in preserving energy. Scientists are aggressively developing sodium-ion batteries, replacing rare and environmentally destructive lithium with cheap, universally abundant sodium derived from salt. These batteries are the ideal candidate for stationary grid-scale energy storage, positioning salt as a critical pillar of the green energy revolution. Salt preserved our ancestors. Now it is preserving the complex supply chains and energy infrastructures of the modern world. If you want to see more deep dives into the hidden systems and dark histories that run our world, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next upload.